So, I wrote a script to make a video about the shooting of Emantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr. And I wanted to talk about things like target identification and stuff like that. I didn't know if I was gonna wait for body cam footage to come out or anything like that. But now reading over the script, it sounds way too weird. But I spent like half an hour on it, even though it's really short. So I'm gonna go over anyway. So quickly, we're gonna talk about Emantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., hereby referred to as EJ. I guess I'll walk you through what happened in the script. So the shooting of Emantic Fitzgerald Bradford Jr., or EJ, has raised many questions in the public about when officers should shoot fleeing suspects, whether it's safe to carry a concealed firearm, and what can be done to stop scenarios like this from happening again. So if you don't know what happened on November 22nd, a shooting broke out in a Galleria Mall in Hoover, Alabama, which is near Birmingham, and wounded a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old. During the shooting, EJ was shot and killed by Hoover police as he was holding a pistol when the officers arrived, from the sources I've been able to gather. Uh, However, autopsy evidence has indicated that EJ was shot in the back, head, and neck, the headshot being the one that killed him. The indication that EJ was fleeing when shot by police is what raises most public concern, as he was not the shooter, was licensed to carry his firearm, and was theoretically not an immediate threat to the officer. I say theoretically because, again, body camera footage hasn't come out. That'll be repeated a few times over but that's a big deal. I'm sure when the investigation's finished, they'll release it. I'll make a video covering that if people want me to when it comes out. Yeah, there are many things to consider here, so I'll cover them one at a time. The first one being target identification. You'll know what I'm talking about here if you've ever taken a defensive shooting class, home defense class, if you've ever taught any of those classes, if you're certified for any of this stuff. So in order to get a full grasp of this case, you have to understand it from both points of view. Emantic sees it as an active shooter in the mall, draws his weapon, and begins to lead people to safety. Until body camera footage is released, it will remain unclear whether or not EJ fled at the sight of the officer, or if he ran to seek out the shooter or more unprotected people, as, at least according to NPR, he was helping lead people to safety. Well, I don't know if his gun was drawn at the time, but he was making an effort in the mall to do that, according to that source. I'll make an updated video with the body camera footage when it's released if people are interested. Anyways, to see this from the other point of view, the responding officer sees this as an active shooter call in a mall, enters, sees a man holding a gun, theoretically, that's, what I've gathered from a couple sources, who is running or begins to run on sight, and he fires at him 3 times. Why it's important that the first person he sees with a gun can be considered the shooter will lead me to my next point. So, the River Chase Galleria in Hoover, Alabama, which is the mall where the shooting took place, is a gun-free zone, and that's indicated on their website. I have a screenshot of it here, but I don't really feel like making a full video for this, so you guys are listening to me. Trust me, if you go to the River Chase Galleria website, it mentions under their code of conduct that there is no firearms or illegal weapons allowed on the property. As it is privately owned, they don't want that. That's fine. Whether it was clearly indicated in the mall, I don't know. But anyone concealed carrying a firearm should always make sure they're legally allowed to do so in whatever space they're in. It's possible that the officer knew that the mall was a gun-free zone, so anyone carrying a firearm is immediately a threat, which can be taken with a grain of salt. That's my assumption there. That's not necessarily what the officer was thinking. I'm just saying, if the officer knew it was a gun-free zone, I'm obviously going, if I was the officer, I'm obviously going to treat whoever's in there holding a gun as somebody threatening, as they should not have a gun. Yes, it's possible that the officer knew the mall was a gun-free zone, so anyone carrying a firearm is immediately a threat. I'm not saying that EJ got himself killed or anything like that, but he shouldn't have been carrying a firearm there in the first place. Again, if you're concealed carrying, you should absolutely be making sure that you are legally allowed to do so whenever place you're in. There's plenty of videos from, other pro-cop channels, Mike the Cop, stuff like that. They make videos about concealed carry and open carry when it's appropriate, how to make sure you can do that. And the third point I wanted to make is Tennessee versus Gardner. A lot of you guys will have heard of this, and a lot of you guys won't have. Tennessee versus Gardner was a Supreme Court case from 1985, ruling that deadly force may only be used against fleeing suspects if they pose a significant threat of death or serious injury to the public. So whether or not EJ was running doesn't change what the officer sees. That being, during an active shooter situation, they see a man with a gun in a gun-free zone who is either running out into the mall full of people or running at the sight of the officer, which, if I were the responding officer, I would see pretty concerning. A man with a gun sees me and starts running away in the middle of an active shooter in a mall. I would treat that guy as some kind of target, or at least suspect. I suppose you could argue that he was only running because he thought the officer would kill him, but if he thought the officer would kill him, why wouldn't he just stop and make it clear that whether or not he was the shooter, he wasn't a threat to the officer or anyone else? The family of EJ is trying to get the officer charged with murder at the moment. I'm not comfortable making a definitive statement without body camera footage being released, but with the information I have before me, I couldn't say you could really charge the officer with anything. I mean, it's a terrible situation. It's extremely unfortunate, but if you're a responding officer, or just if you're an officer, and you have to respond to an active shooter situation in a mall, you walk in, and you see a man holding a firearm in an institution that does not allow firearms, and he's either running into the mall, or he sees you and starts running, I would probably shoot that guy. For, he has a gun in, well, not even technically, he is just straight up illegally carrying a firearm in a situation involving an active shooter. Well, he's illegally carrying a firearm in a mall, and he happens to be doing that in a situation with an active shooter. I understand that he meant well, but it is really, I see more faults here in making sure that he was participating in the right concealed carry practices more so than officer error. I think the officer did the reasonable thing here. Imagine what the headlines would be if, especially if body camera footage was released of the officer walking in and seeing a man with a gun, and he goes, no, I'm not the shooter. The officer goes, oh, okay. Well, let's go find the other guy. That's not an acceptable way to handle things. So target identification is a very important thing. People don't really seem to understand why it's so difficult. This happened at whatever that nightclub was a while back, involving it was the security guard that shot the guy that was the active shooter and got on top of him or something. I don't remember exactly what happened, and the responding officer came and shot the security guard that was trying to keep down the guy that was actually the active shooter, and ended up killing the security guard. It's another one of those terrible situations, but no amount of training will make that room better lit. No amount of training will, make it less noisy. Thanks for listening, guys. If you want to support me or some of the fallen officers from 2018, you can go over to my Teespring. I've got a shirt sale going on right now. Half of the profits from those memorial shirts will be going toward the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, which is helping fund the memorials of people like Officer Singh. So I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to go ahead and manipulate that YouTube algorithm for me, I won't mind, but I'm not going to ask for it. So have a great